Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar, ThePrint Charcha, with Finance Minister poised to present her sixth budget just in a few days. This month, we take a look at what may be in store for you, the industry, and the economy. To take us through key predictions and expectations, we have with us a great set of panelists. We have Aditi Nayar, Chief Economist, Head Research and Outreach, ICRA; Abhishek A Rastogi, founder of Rastogi Chambers Tax; and Devendra Kumar Pant, Chief Economist and Head Public Finance, India Ratings and Research. Thank you all three for joining us, and we will just dive into it. And my first question will be to all three of you, actually, and those could be your opening remarks as well. We know that this is an interim budget and a full one will be announced post-elections once the new government is formed. But previously, we have seen that even in interim budget, we have seen important announcements. For example, in 2019, income tax up to 5 lakh was exempted from income tax, and PM Kisan scheme was also announced. So do you guys anticipate any significant announcement in this budget? Anybody who would like to go first? This is for all three of you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll start. Broadly, in an interim budget, expectations should be quite muted in terms of big bang policy announcements. And in any case, budgets are meant to be a statement of account of revenues and expenditures and the plan for the year forward. Policy changes can happen any time in the year. And for an interim budget, I think we are looking at more of signals in terms of what the government plans to do with the fiscal consolidation. Are they going to stick to the medium-term fiscal path? And what do they think is a fair amount of capex that is achievable next year? So our own forecasts around these things are as such. We think that the government should try to bridge half the gap between the fiscal deficit where we see it in FY24 and where they've said they want to get to an FY26. So we're looking at a fiscal deficit to GDP ratio of 5.3%. And we think that within this, a 10% growth in capex is what is realistic. So what we're going to be looking at during the interim budget is these fiscal metrics, also what kind of tax buoyancy they think is realistic, etc.
Okay. Abhishek, Devendra would like to go next.
I'll go next. So I think as far as this budget is concerned, of course, this is an interim budget, but there will be some significant announcements. And what we are expecting is that there will be some announcements for some specific sectors as far as this production-linked incentive scheme is concerned. A lot of Indian exporters are struggling. The sugar exporters and rice exporters are struggling because of ROTTEP benefit. And there has been a lot of chaos and a lot of matters we have taken to the writ court. I think there will be a policy announcement for ROTTEP benefits to Indian exporters. There will be more clarity on FAME and FAME 3 because there have been a lot of disputes which have gone to the courts with respect to FAME as well. So I think those will be the structural announcements. At the same time, we are expecting some customs duty swings also because India has to keep in line with WTO provisions. And we are also in the process of entering into several foreign trade agreements. And that will be the key. We are expecting certain key announcements with respect to some FTAs as well. So I think that is mostly from the structural perspective. But I think the key to watch will be how much would be the limit will be increased for direct benefit transfer scheme. It is expected that this may go up from 6,000 to 9,000. Almost 50% increase to the existing limit per person. And if that happens, then the relative point which will have to be seen is that what comes as a direct tax implications, because while we know that the reporting which have come, which are now in public domain, the tax to GDP ratios have gone up significantly. The income tax payers have increased in numbers, and also the amount of direct tax collection and the indirect tax collection for that matter has gone significantly up. Now, if that happens, but at the same time, you would want to increase the capital expenditure and you would want to increase this limit of direct benefit transfer scheme by almost 50%. It will be seen that whether there will be something for the taxpayers. It may not be too much in terms of numbers, etc., but there could be certain key announcements as far as the policy is concerned.
Thank you, Abhishek. Devendra, your take?
Yeah, so I'll not repeat what Aditi has just said. Yes, there was tradition that there is no announcements in the interim budget, whether it's the central union level or the state level. Yes, but there are at times what happens is certain sectors are under stress, and if so, can we wait for 4 months for the regular budget to come? Ideally, no, but unlikely that there will be big bang announcements. But yeah, government being government can announce, like you given the example, PM Kisan increasing the income tax limits. Anything can happen. But what we will be looking closely at couple of things, which Aditi has already talked about. So, what is the fiscal consolidation path? 4.6 from 5.9. We believe 5.9 will be most likely be 6, not because of tax collections are bad. Tax collections are very buoyant, but the problem is your GDP, nominal GDP growth, which was 10.5, is growing at 8.9%. That may pull down. So on absolute level, your deficit number may remain same. Deficit number remaining same is a good news for the bond market, because means the government borrowing will not increase in this particular year. Point number one. Point number two, what we'll be looking at like 4.6, 4.5 to 5.3. That's what our number is, same as what Aditi has just said. Minor difference in arithmetic. We believe the nominal GDP growth this year, next year could be around 10.5%, with a buoyancy of 1.2% in taxes, gives you somewhere around 12% increase in net tax revenue. Now, crucial point is where the borrowing level will be. And what we are looking at a borrowing level will be marginally lower than gross borrowing, marginally lower than in next year what it is for this particular year for FY24, and that will be a major sigh of relief or major benefit to the bond market. So, what is the growth assumption, nominal GDP growth assumption? What is the borrowing number, and how much is your fiscal deficit correction this year? These are the things which we will be closely looking at.
Okay, Aditi, I'll come back to you. You mentioned you're expecting a 10% increase in capex. Last year it was 10 lakh crore, and so I just wanted it, and it is a massive capex. So I just wanted, what makes you think that there'd be around 10% increase, and where would it go?
So just to give you some context, we've seen very large increases in capital expenditure since the pandemic. Part of it is because there is a budget that was being undertaken by NHAI and other bodies earlier, which is now on budget. Part of it is also that cost escalations have happened, but there has been a very solid increase in capex in any case, even if we set aside these two factors. As you said, for this year, we have a budget estimate of 10 trillion for Government of India's capex. Out of that, about 4 trillion was left to be completed between December and March. So we have the provisional fiscal data up till November, and what is left, the headroom for capex for the last 4 months is close to 4. I think it's slightly above 4 trillion. And it's a massive growth that is required in these 4 months as well. Now, on one very specific count, we feel that there could actually be a slippage in capex relative to the budgeted target, which is the capex loan scheme, the interest-free capex loan scheme for state governments, where the offtake until December was lagging both the approvals as well as the overall budgeted target. Our sense is that states may not want to offtake a huge amount of money under this scheme in Q4 because they need to show utilization within this quarter. And therefore, we are apprehensive that there will be a large, or not a large, but that there will be a significant shortfall in the offtake under this scheme. And that will contribute to an overall trailing of capex relative to the budget estimate. So we are penciling in an undershooting of around 75,000 crore. And on that revised estimate that we have, or rather our projection for FY24 capex, we believe that a 10% growth in outlay is feasible in FY25. So going up to 10.2 trillion next year. And that is going to be consistent with bringing the fiscal deficit to 5.3% of GDP. Given our expectations for GDP growth, the tax buoyancy, and the overall tax revenue growth, etc.
Okay, thank you. Abhishek, I will now come to you. You also talked about tax revenues. Direct tax revenues have seen strong growth. On the other hand, indirect taxes have fallen short of their projections. So, do you think that will have any impact on government's plan for the interim budget?
No, I think let's just talk about few numbers. If we talk about the tax to the GDP ratio, the tax to the GDP ratio has risen remarkably well to 6.11% today. What has also happened is from 6 lakh crore, the collection has gone to 16 lakh crore in just a gap of 1 year, which is significantly higher number as far as direct tax is concerned. And the reason also is because a lot of better compliance has happened. 3.8 crore people were paying taxes under income tax, but now that number is 7.78 crores. So which means that from the expected number, this number is significantly higher, both in terms of the compliance and the actual tax payment. So as far as the GST collection is also concerned, we were more or less at an average of 1 lakh crore per month. Now this number has touched even 2 lakh crore in few of the months. So if you see the expectation which was there a year before, I think all those targets have been met significantly well. So both on the direct tax side and on the indirect tax side, the tax collection is much improved because of compliance and several other factors. Now, what is important is, and as far as your question with respect to the capital expenditure is concerned, I think 10% is feasible. And as what Aditi mentioned, because if you see that 10%, which would be 1 lakh crore. And if you see the overall increase in the tax collection, that may not be very difficult to meet the target of increase 10%. So what will also happen is, and what we also feel is that there are a lot of litigations which are pending under the indirect tax regime because GST tribunals have not been formed. So the government, what will while we are in the final stage of formation of these tribunals, and there have been a lot of announcements, but I think there'll be much better deadline sort of an announcement which will come with number of benches, etc. Now, what will happen is in that process of GST tribunals being formed, there is high expectation of the government that a lot of demands will conclude, a lot of these litigations will conclude, and it may be quite possible that some sort of an amnesty scheme may be given to even settle this before, the matters reach tribunal, which will give additional couple of lakh crores easy amount could be, recovered and reducing disputes, etc. So I think seeing the overall tax buoyancy and the GDP to tax ratio, I think it appears that, we are in safe hands, and there will be announcements with respect to this increase in capital expenditure, increase in this direct benefit transfer schemes, and things like that, which will be more reformative sort of a road map for the country.
Okay. Devendra, you talked about how things may or may not happen in budget, and you talked about some sectors that may be needing help, but 4 months is too shorter time. Could you elaborate a bit on
too longer
time? But could you elaborate on which are these sectors, and what can be done in budget to help these sectors?
Look, as we are seeing the crisis in the Red Sea, right? That could have an impact on the landed cost of goods which we are importing and cost of goods which we are exporting. Now, it is something which I doubt whether the budget can do. Right. Now, the problem is, if you look at what we are struggling from last couple of years, is very low consumption growth. Even for this year, FY24, as per first advance estimate, it is less than around 3%. The second half this year will show you a bump up consumption growth, because second half last year had 2.5% consumption growth. Why it is so low? Because if you look at the real wages for people at the bottom of the pyramid, despite PM Kisan 6,000 rupee going to them every year, despite 80 crore people getting free food grain from 2021, why our consumption growth is not coming back? Forget 7%, 8%. Why it is not coming back at 5%? It was simple arithmetic, 5%. It's close to 58% or so weight in GDP. A 5% kind of thing will straight away give you close to 3% GDP growth. We are not able to get that growth. We had seen the situation falling household savings. And falling household savings and rising personal leverage. Because we keep on reading every day in the newspaper, the bank's personal loan growth is 20%, 25%, 30%. Thankfully, the banks don't lend to everyone. They lend to the people, the 4 people on the screen, or people like us, or people like those who are listening this podcast or webinar. That's why the banking sector is safe. But if the personal loan to GDP ratio is going up, so basically what is happening, a rational consumer will consume on the basis of lifetime income hypothesis. The moment the income growth is lower than what he or she was experiencing in the recent past or past couple of years, it looks at whether initially it believes it's a temporary phenomenon and continue to consume. And how it consumes, either it borrows, leverage consumption, or they dip down on their savings. Now, when they realize that the new normal is not what they are facing income growth they are experiencing right now, but the new normal may be lower than that, they apply a brake in consumption. And that's what we are seeing. The goods purchased by the upper end of the society, all of us are, those who are again part of this, are part of that upper income bracket or upper strata of the population. Our consumption hasn't gone down despite COVID coming in, despite whatever has happened. But people at the bottom end, their consumption growth has slowed down. It slowed down considerably. We look at the real rural wages, they are in 1 or 2% range. Whereas the rural real wages of the people, those who are in the corporate sector or other places, they are still growing at a decent pace. And unless we remove that, because it's really puzzling that 80 crore people getting food subsidy, so 2 lakh crore going to that, 6,000 rupee per farmer is going. Despite that, we are not seeing uptick in the consumption, because what has happened is this money has given them the food consumption. But other than that, we are not seeing that kind of consumption growth taking place.
But then what should be done? Like, food is taken care of. What are the measures? We have farmers getting income. Government is trying to push consumption, but it's not happening. What are certain measures that can make it possible?
Look, cost of health has gone up. All of us know. Post-COVID, health inflation has gone up. Doctor, which used to be charged 500 rupee for when you visit, is now charging 1,100 or 1,200 rupee. So that cost has gone up. The transportation cost has gone up. Your school education fee has gone up. And mind you, we are looking at trying about physical infrastructure. Yes, physical infrastructure will give us growth. But in order to sustain that growth, you have to improve quality of your labor force. Look at what the East Asian miracle, the buzzword in late 80s or early 90s, newly industrialized economies, NIEs or East Asian miracle. They have built up by the productivity growth, and that productivity growth had come by a trained educated labor force. 2 weeks back or 1 week back, ASHA report came, and the quality of education remains the same, which it was, say, a decade or decade and a half or 2 decades back. Nothing has changed. So until unless we look at those aspects, it's very difficult to have a sustained growth. Now, look, we should not be bothered about, like, fixated about 8% growth next year or 8% growth in 2 years. Even if we are able to get a respectable 6 to 7% growth for a decade or decade and a half, we will be, if we do it decade 7%, we'll be double. We'll be double of what we are today. We do it one and a half decade, we'll be roughly 3 times of where we are today. So what is more important, according to me, is the sustainability of that growth, rather than growth going up 1 year and then coming down.
Got it. There's a similar question, related question that we have from one of our subscribers. I'll put it to all three of you. Anyone can take it. They've asked, do you think there can be any announcements in the budget that can help address unemployment and also the possible impact of AI on jobs? Who would want to take this?
I can take this. See, as far as this unemployment is concerned, I think we've been talking about certain sectors where there will be some structural announcements. And I think most of these announcements will come to achieve the twin perspective or the twin goal of not only the Make in India perspective or enhanced Make in India, but also these will be labor intensive sectors. For instance, there will be these announcements which will come with a focus, and the focus will be either to enhance manufacturing capabilities, or at the same time these will be labor incentive sectors which will ensure that employment is generated in India. So that these will be the structural announcements as far as we are expecting. Now, to answer the artificial intelligence aspect, let us just understand and let us make it very clear. When calculators were invented, when computers were invented, when internet came, did it conclude in the unemployment? And the answer is no. The efficiencies increased. When computer came, what was done manually was done on a machine. When computers came, so after calculator, when computers came, the efficiency increased. When internet came, the efficiency further increased. Now, see the importance of artificial intelligence. We need to move ahead with technology, but which would not mean that there will be unemployment because of this artificial intelligence. There will be better ways of doing things. There will be efficiencies. And even if you see my profession, and I am a chartered accountant and an advocate, now, most of these advocates are using artificial intelligence. Most of our clients, even for their legal correspondence, are using artificial intelligence. And so what? See, somebody's gain is somebody's loss. And even if now clients or people or consumers are using artificial intelligence to use it, I think they are saving on some part of the cost, which could be some other person's profit. But what will happen is, over the period of time, the efficiencies will improve. Technology comes into play. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, it is not the AIs, etc., only wherein, you are getting these drafts by way of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence today is also used by the government at different levels. Today, we have the system of usage of artificial intelligence at the level of the government, by which they are tracking humongous data. What are these people who have filed income tax returns with a lesser income but are buying cars of more than 20 lakhs. The government today has this data through this artificial intelligence that there were 1 crore of cars which was sold for, which were like more than 15 lakh rupees. But the income, tax returns are not in that range. So are there serious deviations? Right. So as far as this artificial intelligence is concerned, these are used by the government. These will be used by consumers. And there have been a lot of instances of usage of this artificial intelligence, even for procurements, wherein, whether these procurements are legitimate, illegitimate, whether taxes have been paid on these procurements, and how are these becoming part of the supply chain. And the government has tracked thousands and thousands of fake invoices, billing cases, including insurance sector, which is supposed to be a very organized sector. But artificial intelligence has been used to track those agents and intermediaries. I'm not saying whether it is legally right or wrong, but yes, intelligence has been used to track these. So I think, to summarize, I would put it like this. As far as the employment generation is concerned, I think it will remain the priority of this government. And as far as the artificial intelligence, new tech, new ways of doing things and technology will concern, I think there will again be a robust plan so that we are not left behind as far as technology is concerned. I am a firm believer and optimist of this, that any new technology, any new intelligence which will come, any new ways of doing business in India will just upgrade our systems, will just improve and enhance our potential and efficiencies.
Okay, great. Aditi, there's one more subscriber question, and if you'd like to take it, the subscriber says a substantial portion of middle income earner is paid in taxes. Do you think there is a case for further raising income tax exemption limit? Although he has suggested it to be raised to 12 lakhs a year. One, do you think that is feasible? And do you think there is a case for raising this limit?
Yeah, as far as the income tax limit threshold is concerned, certainly with inflation, there is always this desire or this demand that the bar be reset regularly. There are basically two issues with that. One is that we worked very hard to get a lot of people into the tax net. And the fear is that when we raise the threshold, will we end up, losing out on those income tax earners, which we've with great difficulty brought into the tax net. And again, when we go back into looking at the overall fisc, one of the major issues with India's fiscal metrics is that our tax to GDP ratio is quite low as compared to a lot of other peer countries. And this is something that is also very hard to actually increase. So do you want to lose out on the hard-won gains in terms of the enhancement of the tax net, which has already taken place? And the second, of course, is can we afford it? I mean, we have a fiscal deficit target that we aspire to get toward. Right now, we need to be 4.5% of GDP by FY26. And the amount by which we raise this threshold is going to have a direct impact on what kind of tax buoyancy we can actually achieve going ahead. And yes, there will be a multiplier from the tax saved. A large part of that may actually go into consumption, and that will create a multiplier. But it would be a very fine trade-off. I'm afraid 12 lakhs just sounds far too high to me. But can 5 go to 5.5 or 6 or 6.5 without having a negative impact on the total quantum of taxes that we raise? I think that is a very serious question that we need to have a clear sort of very, very scientific evidence in terms of the marginal propensities to consume and also the taxation generated from consumption. Because keep in mind that indirect taxes are raised from consumption. So this is something that will have to be a very nuanced mathematical working that the finance ministry will have to undertake to find that revenue neutral level effectively, the revenue neutral level to which you can increase the tax threshold without actually foregoing any tax.
Okay. Can I just say something?
Yes.
See, while we've been talking quite a bit about, the income tax for the middle class, I have no problem whatever limit you set for them. But if you see the income tax, even for the rich, it is significantly high. The surcharges are 25% for people whose income is more than 2 crores. And this surcharge was 37% if the income is more than 5 crores. Effectively what happens, if a person is earning more than 2 crores, he is paying more than 1/3 of the salary only in taxes. Today, that effective rate is 39%. So almost 40%, which was some 42%. So if you add these surcharges and education cess and this cess and all that cess, the effective income tax rate is 39 point some percent. I think 39.78%, more or less 40%. Which means that when we are talking about the middle class, in terms of the total proportion or the amount which he's paying as tax may be significantly higher from his perspective. But if you talk about the rich class as well, they are ending up paying up 40%. More than in a quarter, when we pay advance taxes, more than a month's income goes for advance tax. You basically have to just throw away 1 month out of that quarter to pay your advance taxes. Now, why I'm saying this is, and we've been making this point to the Honorable Finance Minister, and she was, very supportive when we explained to her that India may reach a situation of wealth drain. We spoke about brain drain, but there could be a situation of wealth drain, which may happen. And because of these suggestions, Honorable Finance Minister reduced that surcharge from 37% to 27%. And effectively what will happen is, if you will make these surcharges very high, the 1% top income paying people will think of options of moving out of India. They will have family offices outside of India. Their global incomes will not be taxed in India. They will move out of the India. They will move some of the family members outside of India, so that all their global incomes are not taxed in India, are taxed outside of India only. So I think, while it's a good thought to talk about the middle class, but I think at some point of time, the government will have to think of scrapping this surcharge. Absolutely. There cannot be any surcharge at all. If a person is earning more and is paying 30%, that is sufficient enough. Why should I pay more taxes if I'm working more? I don't think surcharge is a very good option. It will lead to, people thinking of options of stepping out of India. And we had done some calculation. So for instance, if I need to buy Taj Chambers membership, which is 25 lakh rupees, to take that membership of 25 lakh rupees, I pay 18% tax, which makes it 29.50, almost 30 lakh rupees. And to earn 30 lakh rupees to make that payment of 30 lakhs, I need to earn 50 lakhs because 40% goes in tax. So when I earn 50 lakhs, I end up getting something which is of 25 lakhs. And even the rich are paying about 50% of the taxes cumulatively. So I think surcharge will have to be looked into. There have been very serious discussions and conversations with the Ministry of Finance with respect to these surcharges. Also keeping in mind the number of family offices which are being, opened now outside of India. And we are very optimistic that this government will take certain steps with respect to these surcharges as well.
Okay. This is largely my last question. This is for all three of you. We have briefly talked about economic growth, and we have also talked about fiscal deficit targets. But to close this session, I wanted to ask that we are seeing a lot of global headwinds right now. So amid these headwinds, what kind of impact do you think we can see on India's economic growth? And then what is your forecast for economic growth? And same fiscal deficit, what do you think for the next financial year, what will be the targets? This is for all three of you. Aditi, if you want to start, and then we can.
So, given the global headwinds and given the agricultural situation, which is not particularly good, we've had a bad monsoon, and a lot will depend on how well the next monsoon is distributed. And the fact that we're expecting that after the elections, the budget will probably only be presented on July 1, after which the rainy period will be there. So capex may actually have a back-ended pickup in FY25. So given all of this, we have a moderate growth expectation of around 6.2% for FY25. There could be upsides to this. One upside could be if the monsoon is indeed very well distributed and rural consumption then becomes less cautious and becomes more exuberant towards the second half of next year. The second is if capex picks up faster than we expect from the central government, and if state capex continues in a normal fashion even during the election month. So that is an if right now. We're not sure whether state capex will be healthy in the first quarter, in spite of the fact that the parliamentary elections will be going on. So given these caveats, our baseline is 6.2%. And these reasons which I've just identified are basically what could lead to an upside.
And what about fiscal deficit?
We're working with 5.3% of GDP.
Okay, great. Abhishek, would you want to go next?
So I think as far as your question is concerned, I feel that two areas which need to be looked into is gold and crude to talk about, because India is importing that in large quantities. So what will be the policy keeping the geopolitical tensions, situations, emergencies, etc.? I think the policy of the government with respect to some of these gold, import of gold, etc., and the crude will be very, very relevant. At the same time, what we understand is India is in very good terms with several countries, and hence what is today very important is our friends who, with whom we feel today that we can enhance our trade relationships. There will be foreign trade agreements which will come into play. Now these could be specific related to countries or specifically related to certain commodities such as crude oil, import of crude, etc. Now it will depend that at what magnitude these foreign trade policies, in what detail these foreign trade policies are getting signed, and what will happen to the customs duty swings when it comes to these imports, when these are from the countries with which India has foreign trade policy and foreign trade agreements, and with countries with which India doesn't have those foreign trade agreements, and what will be the position of India, especially for imports where we know for a fact that anti-dumping happens where dumping happens in India. So will the government be bold enough to impose anti-dumping on countries and on products when we know for a fact that dumping happens in India from China, for instance? So what will be the stand of the country? Will there be certain policy announcements with respect to those anti-dumping provisions? Will be things to watch in very, very closely this budget.
Yeah, thank you. Devendra, you have the closing remarks.
Okay, so as we said earlier, 5.3 kind of fiscal deficit. Now, growth not going into repeating what Aditi has just said. One biggest risk which we have, and what happened is when we revised the GDP series at 2011-12 base, and these revisions are done based on what UN system of national account says, and there are different ways of doing it. So one is value added. So till now we were doing value of goods and services produced in country as the value added. But what has happened is the definition is changed. Now we are looking at the value addition. Now, if your input prices are growing at a slower pace, much slower pace. So in India, WPI is the proxy for PPI, Producers Price Index, which developed world has. And it remained in negative territory till October, and it's only November, December, it's barely positive. Now, CPI has also fallen, but it has not fallen at that pace compared to the previous year. So the gap between the output and input prices is bigger in this fiscal. And even with the lower volume, with the higher per unit value addition, you are getting a higher value added number. Come FY25, your WPI is going to be in positive territory. Base effect will have a big role to play in that. And your per unit value addition is going to compress in FY25 from FY24. And that will be challenging to maintain the kind of growth which we had seen in last 2 years. So the growth number, since we haven't published it, so I can't give you, but it will be certainly lower than sub 7% kind of number in FY25.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. With this, we come to the close of this webinar. Thank you so much, Abhishek, Devendra, Aditi, for joining us and all our subscribers. And we hope this was a very informative session for everybody viewing this. Thank you so much.